Went back to my desk, and all of a sudden I'm surrounded. There's FBI, CIA, DIA, DOD, any acronym you can think of. Everybody's there. And my colleagues are all around there. They're watching this because they were very blatant about what they were doing. And they said, we want to speak to you. The agent in charge looked at me and said, there's spying going on here. Why don't you tell us what's going on? And I said, why don't you tell me what's going on? And he said, well, they're spying. I said, with who? With Israel. Shabbos, we were going to have guests over the next day. The phone rings. It's kind of unusual on Friday night in the house. And obviously, Shabbos, I'm not going to pick up, but we had the old-fashioned answer machines. And I listen, and I hear, David, pick up. It's Marty. You got to pick up. They're coming tomorrow. You got to pick up the phone.
Imagine dedicating your life to protecting American soldiers and then being accused of betraying them. David Tenenbaum was a loyal U.S. Army engineer who helped design vehicles that saved lives on the battlefield. But one day, his colleagues turned on him, accusing him of being an Israeli spy. No evidence, just anti-Semitism. His home was raided, his reputation shattered, and his faith tested. This episode is in memory of Shimon David ben Yaakov Shleima, as well as Miriam Sarah Bas Yaakov Moshe. This episode is Refuah Shleima Yosef Chaim ben Devorah Chaya Golda, and this episode is powered by Bitbean, Wheel Solis, The Dream Raffle, and Twillory. Here we go. Dr. David Tenenbaum, could you tell me what happened that changed your life?
I'm actually trying to figure that out myself. But probably the best way to start is like this. I was hired to work for the Army as a civilian engineer. This is going way back. I don't even know when I was hired, 1984, possibly. And I was hired because they said, hey, when I interviewed with them, I'd worked for General Dynamics before that. And I also I was working in the medical school at one of the major universities in Michigan as an engineer, also as a bioengineer, chemical engineer. And I decided it was time to move on from General Dynamics. And I worked with someone who knew somebody, and they said, hey, you'd be perfect for the guys that used to work for me at the U.S. Army. I said, okay. So I went in the interview, and they said, hey, you're perfect for this job. We need you. Why? We have Israeli programs. You speak Hebrew. You've been to Israel. You have contacts in Israel, and you've lived in Israel because I went to yeshiva in Israel also, and it'd be great. So we went through, the pluses and minuses, and they said, okay, we'll get back to you, and they hired me. And a few years later, also skipping around a little bit, because I did work Israeli programs. I'd been sent to Israel probably 3 times when I was hired. I found out, I didn't even know this at the time, but there were certain people that were suspicious of me working with Israel or just working for the Army. I found out even years later, there was a Department of Defense memo that came out, which was quickly repudiated, I'm told, that said any Jew that works for the Department of Defense is a potential spy for Israel. I didn't know that at the time. And apparently there were people that were very suspicious of me working with Israelis. I wear my yarmulke at work. I carried a knapsack with me that contains Sfarim I use when I had a break. And I had my lunch with me and food with me. So it was no big deal. And keeping in mind, I'm going to set the tone here. They used to call my office, my area, the United Nations, because we had guys there from all different places. I worked in survivability, specifically at that point in the armor area, meaning that my job was to make sure that soldiers would come home alive and in one piece. We worked to try to make the tanks better, the Bradleys better, land combat vehicles better. The people in my office, there were somebody from Taiwan, there was somebody from Russia, from Germany, from Iran, all different walks of life. But apparently Israel was the one country, and being a Jew was the one religion that caused certain people to have, there's dual loyalties here. So what happened was, at one point in time, I was asked, again, I'm sorry, keep in mind too, I would speak to my kids in Hebrew on the phone, And I was assigned, there were 4 liaison officers on our base at the time. I worked with every single one of them. And I had programs with Israelis quite a bit, and with the other ones as well, Canadian, British, and Germans. The Israeli one who I spoke to quite a bit was the only one that concerned the people that were involved in accusing me of treason. And that's a kind of big word to use, because I always ask people, do you know what the penalty for treason is? I mean,
I have no clue what the penalty for treason is.
Well, it's either life imprisonment or it's a death penalty. And I was being accused of treason. What happened was there were different agents, different points in time in the area I was working in, or my quote colleagues, who I thought were my colleagues, would go to the counterintelligence people on my base or the FBI, and they said, hey, he speaks Hebrew. That concerns us. Like, what part concerns you? This guy speaking Russian, this guy speaking Persian, this guy speaking Chinese or Japanese. That doesn't concern you, but that's what's going through my mind, because I didn't know about this. Apparently, there's what's called SAIDA, subversive acts of espionage directed against the Army. You, as my colleague, couldn't say, something about that Tenenbaum guy concerns us. So you can go to the FBI, you can go to the counterintelligence people and file a complaint against me. Apparently, I had 6 or 7 of these complaints filed against me. No idea this is going on. This is before I was actually even accused. But it reached a point where the counterintelligence person, Lieutenant Colonel John Simonini, I use his name, at that point, he had gone to the FBI. He was approached by what we call the military intelligence people, the Keystone Cops, I'd call them, from one of the Air Force bases, one of the areas in Michigan. And he went to the FBI and said, we got to investigate this guy. He's dirty. And they would go back to him and say, show us some proof. Well, this guy told me this. He speaks Hebrew. Well, that's not proof. Show me something. And he kept going back and forth the FBI. And at one point, they actually told him that, stop coming back to us. You're wasting our time. So he decided to do his own investigation, which is illegal. And even the FBI had said at one point, you're doing this stuff, kind of getting on different points. You're doing this stuff, but don't tell him he's under investigation, because he'll get an attorney. And we don't want him getting an attorney. Well, you can hear all the legal things going on at this point. And he told my boss, put him in for higher level security clearance. Why? Because the higher level security clearance, a top secret clearance, they can interview you. They can even give you a polygraph. They can do a lot of different things. And the problem was that I refused the higher level clearance. It's a pain in the neck. I didn't want it. And they kept pushing and pushing until finally I said, fine, I'll do it. And at that point, they had a couple people, and I am skipping, I don't want to take up all your time,
sure,
but I'm skipping a bunch of things here. And I was interviewed by 2 gentlemen, we'll call them, and intelligence people from the Keystone Cops. And it was a good cop, bad cop routine. And in the morning, they said, okay, what kind of work do you do? And keeping in mind, I had already been to Israel a number of times. I've been to the Netherlands. I traveled to the UK, Singapore. I've been around the world, literally. And my reports, I'd written up on every place I've been to. And most of the reports are classified, and only certain people can read them. And they asked me about the different things, and I told them what was happening. This is the kind of work I've been doing. Nothing's classified. And I was working on a program at the time called the Light Armored Systems Survivability Program. It's called the LAST program. I told that, and it's not that anybody's smarter than anybody else, but you could see what's going on. And I said, if we ever get into a war, this is before Iraq and Afghanistan, if we ever get into a war, the Humvees that we send, first of all, they're not made for front echelon battle. They're made for rear echelon. You put them in the front, soldiers will die. And we can do something about it because we can work with Israelis and Germans, because they have some of the best ballistic engineers and real-time data, as well as computer modelers. It's concerned them that I was working with Israel, not Germany. It's concerned I was working.
Didn't accuse you of being a Nazi.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I found out, by the way, later, when I needed to use these for my case, they destroyed all my reports. They shredded Everything I ever did with Israel, they shredded. Which
I don't know about rules, but that sounds illegal.
It was illegal, and that to show that he was spying. They shredded all my reports. Even there was a report I had done at one point. I had spent a good number of weeks over there, and I wrote up a report, and only I think 6 or 7 people were allowed to even read the report. And people that I actually showed it to, that I get their opinion on it, who was allowed to read it, and said, great report, where everything was needed. And I went to use that report eventually to help my case, and it no longer existed. It was gone. And going back to these 2 guys, one guy, he's asking me just normal questions. And in the afternoon, after lunch, the second guy said, you're spying. You're spying for Israel. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you're spying for Israel. This is because you've been there. I said, yeah. You speak Hebrew? Yes. And, there's been a number of complaints about you. Like, what do you mean complaints? Well, you speak Hebrew. And then, you're on the phone. And I said, I'm speaking to a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. I said, well, can you prove that? And I said, this is being ridiculous. And they said, look, we could, to get your security clearance, let's just do a polygraph, security clearance, and just we'll keep it, it'll just clean everything up. And I said, and what happens if I refuse? They said, best case is that you'll either sit in a corner here, you'll never do anything again for the rest of your career, or you're going to prison, and you're going to be accused of espionage. I said, well, I guess I have not much of a choice here, do I? And I didn't know my rights at that point. I had no idea what was going on. And they were going to set up a time for the polygraph.
And when you say polygraph, that's a lie detector?
Lie detector test, I'm sorry.
Well.
And eventually, I had spoken, there's a close friend of mine who lives down the block from me, and he's Stuart Snyder. And Stuart and his wife, Janet, Dr. Snyder, have been friends for many years. And Stuart was an attorney, or is an attorney, but he's the attorney that takes care of, your real estate planning type of thing. So he wasn't quite the right person, but he and I had been speaking. I said, look, I might need an attorney, but, we'll talk further. Eventually I was told I was going to take a polygraph, and I went to take the polygraph. What I didn't know behind the scenes was they had this, the FBI was behind the scenes now. They were with this guy, because what happened was Sanity had gone back to the FBI, and he was manufacturing evidence. Things that I didn't do, or things I had nothing to do with. And the FBI said, okay, we're gonna do it. There's gonna be an investigation. Now, Sanity was doing his own investigation. That's illegal. FBI is the only one that could do espionage investigations. He was not allowed to do anything. So there's a lot of legal things going on here. They had supposedly the top polygraph examiner in the US on standby if I agreed to do it, which obviously I had no choice. And they brought him in right away, and I went to take the polygraph.
Were you nervous? Because you know that you're a good guy and not doing anything bad, but is there I was nervous to some extent. I was angry, and more angry at that point, because when I went, there's so many different investigators. One investigator was there, and he said, you need to sign this. What am I signing? It says, there's nothing. It's just like, this is being used for whatever your job or whatever. It was like some ridiculous thing. And I had a tape recorder with me, and I wanted to tape. This is before this is the cassette tapes, and people have it nowadays. And they said, you're not allowed to take that in with you. And there was no two-way mirror, no recorder. I was strapped to this machine, and I don't know if you know how polygraphs work. The first thing they ask you is that, did you get a good night's sleep? Did you have any alcohol? Did you take any medications, drugs, or anything like that? If you have, the polygraph's not going to work well at all. And I had it, and it was fine. And I was strapped to that with one break, probably for close to 8 or 9 hours. And if you imagine going through this, it reached the point where the polygrapher was right in my face, and he was saying, I've done other Jews before, and I've gotten them to confess, and I'll get you to confess too. Whoa. And
then he looks at me and says, yeah, I had another Jew at one point. They did this, and something to do. They had married somebody, and I could tell you're a spy by the look in your eyes. And I'm like, this guy is off the wall. And I was getting really angry. And then once that happens, this polygraph's no good because it's gonna mess up on everything, and it's down the tubes. And he said, he puts a piece of paper in front of me, and he says, I want you to confess. I said, confess to what? He says, I want you to write out a confession. And the confession is going to say that you gave classified information to every Israeli you ever met over the course of 10 years on every classified program you ever worked on inadvertently. I said, that doesn't even make any sense. And I said, I'm not signing anything. And he says, if you don't sign it, then we're going to have some problems. And he said, I'll give you till, it was a Thursday. I'll give you till Monday to sign it. And I start to walk out, and I'm thinking, I made a call in the meantime to one of my rabbeim at the times. And he said, get out of there. He said, it's a trap. They're just trying to trap you into something. And I said, yeah, I kind of figured that one. And I had gone back, then I left, and I was on my way home, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should tell my she had no idea what was going on. I said, let me wait a little longer. And could have been that night. I actually went back to Stuart again, told him what was going on. And Friday morning, I go into work at my office. And as I'm going in, I notice my computer's missing. Behind the scenes, again, I found this out later, behind the scenes, the polygrapher went to the FBI and he told them Tenenbaum confessed to everything. He confessed he's a spy, he committed espionage, is guilty of treason, and also found out that he destroyed his notes from our polygraph. Right. So everything here is like so totally off beaten path. And the FBI told the gate, with the MPs at the gate, make sure Tenenbaum gets in. And then we're on our way, but hold him there. Don't tell him why, but hold him there. Don't let him leave, go home. So they take my computer was taken, and I tried to get on to through someone else's computer. It was a friend of mine, as I thought at the time, and I tried to get onto his computer. He says, it's weird. You're not in the system anymore. What's going on? I said, I don't know. What do you mean? I can't get on the system. And I had went to the MP's office. I filed there. They tried to keep me there as long as possible. Went back to my desk, and all of a sudden I'm surrounded. There's FBI, CIA, DIA, DOD, any acronym you can think of. Everybody's there. And my colleagues are all around there. They're watching this because they were very blatant about what they were doing. And they said, we want to speak to you. And they're trying to get a room there. They hadn't set it up already. So they go to this area, just kind of, it's closed, but there's a door there. And they went to one guy, said, we'd like to use this area. And the guy said, you're not using my area. He tells the FBI, you can't, get out of here. No, I need this area. This is a conference room. I need this. So they found a conference room. We all sit down at the conference room. They leave the door open, and Special Agent James Cugino, the agent in charge, looked at me and said, there's spying going on here. Why don't you tell us what's going on? And I said, why don't you tell me what's going on? And he said, well, they're spying. I said, with who? With Israel. I said, oh, I understand. So there's spying going on. I'm the Jew, so I'm the one that's doing the spying? And he's like, well, we didn't mean it like that. What did you mean? And he started asking me all these different questions, and questions regarding the work I've done with Israelis in the past. And he said, well, it says here that you were friends with, your father was friends with this one Israeli liaison officer, and he got you involved. I said, well, first of all, let me explain something. My father wasn't friends with any Israeli liaison. I was connected with him because that was part of my job here. And I introduced him to my father because, for whatever reason, and he started all these different things, and it was all wrong. The polygrapher was gave him wrong information. And at that point, I saw in the eyes of the special agent, he said something wasn't adding up, because you can check my information. It was very easy. Now, again, I'm kind of backtrack from my father was a Holocaust survivor. He was the only survivor in his family. And to this day, I still don't know if there were 2 other siblings or 3 other siblings. He was in Auschwitz and other camps. and he never really talked about it at all. But this is all going on now. I just actually pretty much finished saying Kaddish a few months before. And I told my wife, I remember, if my father was alive at the time, this would have killed him. To know his son was being accused of espionage, another anti-Semitic act. So it reached the point where the special agent, you see something just didn't click. And the funny thing is, John Simonini, who was the one that was a major accuser in this, wasn't even there. Apparently he was closing on a house or something. I'm like, well, if this is written up in the documents, this is possibly one of the biggest spy cases in the history of the United States and Michigan. And he's closing on a house and he's not there watching the fruits of his labor come to this fruition. Like, what's going on here? But he wasn't there. And I finally looked at the special agent. He said to me, we want to come search your house. I said, I don't think that's going to happen. I said, I think I need to get an attorney. And he said, well, definitely we're not going to be able to get into your house now. I said, that's correct. And I got up and I said, look, I'm leaving. If you want to arrest me, arrest me. If not, I'm gone. And he said, we don't have anything to arrest you on. I said, I know. You know why? Because I haven't done anything wrong. And I got up and remember, this door's open. All of my colleagues hear everything that's going on. And I'm walking out. It was like walking through the hall, a walk of shame. And the door to get out into the parking lot, because where I parked was close by. And I'm walking and I'm closing my eyes. I'm thinking to myself, any minute now, there's going to be a tap on my shoulder and there's going to be handcuffs put on me and I'm going to jail or prison. And I got close to my car, which is only maybe 50 feet from where the door was. And there's a tap on my shoulder. And I look around, one of the MPs looks at me and says, Dr. Tenenbaum, I need your badge. And he takes my badge and he scrapes off the parking decal on my car, which is getting more and more embarrassing, again, because it's being watched. And I get in my car and I start to drive home and I'm thinking, any minute now, there's going to be red and blue lights in back of me. And I'm thinking, this is like so crazy. And I get home, no red and blue lights. I come in the house and my wife looks at me and says, is it a Friday? I said, what are you doing home so early? I said, well, I'm having some problems at work. And she looks at me and she says, well, what kind of problems? I said, well, they think I'm a spy. And she, even though my wife, and she says, well, with who? I said, Israel. She says, are you? She didn't mean it like that. She meant like, did you do something by accident? I said, no, I've gone through in my head everything. There's nothing I ever did, anything wrong. And I said, I have to call Stuart. So I give Stuart a call. And I said, Stuart, this is what's going on. He said, I'll get back to you. I said, I need an attorney. Literally 2 minutes. Stuart's amazing. Him and his wife are just amazing. And he calls me back in 2 minutes. He says, I'm picking you up. We're going downtown, 20 minutes away. And we're going to meet an attorney. Got in his car. I told him what was going on. Go to this attorney, the attorney, Marty Crandall. I still speak to him periodically now. Really, really nice guy. He was a former prosecuting attorney. And I told him what was going on. And he kind of like almost told me that if they're going after you, the way it works is they're gonna do something. They're not just gonna do it just to say, oh yeah, it's not a big deal. And he called up, he knew all the prosecuting attorneys, and he was telling the prosecuting attorney who was in charge of the case, says, we got to slow this down. Something's just not right. And he gets off phone. He said, okay, I'll be your attorney. We need a $5,000 retainer fee. Now, me being a dumb engineer, like a $5,000, okay, that ought to last a few months, maybe a couple days. This was what happened. And I asked him, I said, you said 5,000? He said, yeah. And I paid him at that point, went home, talked to my wife. And I think I even asked them, are they going to come to my house, whatever. And that night, as a Shabbos, we were going to have guests over the next day. There's the phone rings. It's kind of unusual on a Friday night in the house. And obviously Shabbos, I'm not going to pick up, but we had the old fashioned answer machines. And I listen and I hear, David, pick up. It's Marty. You got to pick up. They're coming tomorrow. You got to pick up the phone. and I got to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, this isn't good. And I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to go get Stuart. I'm going to go to see Roy Eisenberger. Roy Eisenberger is, he's one of my rebbeim. I'm close with him, not just as a Rav, as a friend. And I go to Stuart, and I remember distinctly, I knocked on the door. He's in the middle of the Shabbos meal, and Jan answered the door. Jan already had come there so many times that she wasn't angry. She was more like, he's in the middle of the meal. I said, I really need to. And she apologized to me afterwards. She had no clue what was going on. I said, Stuart, we got to go to Reisenberg. Stuart lived about basically like a 30-second walk down the block. Reisenberger lived 4 houses away from him. Go to Reisenberger, knock on the door. It's Friday night. Everybody's eating their Suda. And I said, I need to speak to you about something. He said, okay. We go in, and I said, listen, I'm going to ask you a question. And you've never heard this before. And all the questions you've been had, you've never heard this kind of thing. And he wasn't saying it to be like a bagaiva or anything like that. He said, I've heard it all. So I started to speak to him. He looks at me and says, you're right. I haven't heard it all. He said, yeah, that's a good one. He said, no, you can't call him back. There's nothing you can do. Just, you have to wait and see what happens. And Stuart said, when they come, he could see my house because his house was going down this towards my direction. It's hard to really see, but he can see if anybody pulls up to my house.
This story is only just beginning, and you'll hear why David is such an inspiring guy. But first, as the weather cools down, you may be getting chilly. Maybe you need a sweater, maybe you need a vest, or how about a jacket? Twillory doesn't just make comfortable, warm-up pieces. They make pieces that actually last. I have my jacket for over 2 years now, and it looks brand new. And the Inspiration Chevra is going to get 20% off with the code INSPIRE20 at checkout at Twillory.com. Of course, you can stop into the location on Central Avenue in the 5 towns or shop in their store in Lakewood. Really beautiful, great quality stuff that makes you feel good and look good, and your mother will thank me. Again, use code word INSPIRE20 for that promo of 20% off on Twillory.com. We will be right back this week's episode with Moshe Chaim Proctor, and the best part is still coming up. But first, I am joined today with someone who's going to tell you how you can win in a beautiful apartment in Yerushalayim. Joined today with my good friend Rishmuel Sackett. Rishmuel, tell us the deal.
Yaakov, first of all, I love being on this show, but for the past few years, we've been talking about $1 million apartment. We're not raffling it off anymore. We're raffling off a $1.2 million apartment.
Wow.
And for the first year ever, it's fully furnished. We have a professional interior designer design the place. You can literally win the raffle and use this key. This is the key to the apartment. For those watching it comes with a cool keychain that says Dream Raffle on the keychain. And this is the key to the apartment. You win the apartment, you walk right in, fully furnished. There's a dishwasher, and there's an oven and a stove and a refrigerator, dining room set, table, chairs, couch, bedrooms. Everything is completely furnished. As a matter of fact, this year we're also having a sukkah. There's a beautiful balcony, and there's going to be a big sukkah there. Everything is included. TheDreamRaffle.com, something we have never done before.
Now, for the inspiration listeners, do we get like a special code?
Yes, well, because you're special people, so you're going to get a special code. But 1 second.
Amazing.
First of all, if you enter now, there's an early bird bonus raffle of $15,000 cash. Now, you can win that and also win the raffle at the end. So that'll help you, fly from the States, whatever, to your apartment. $15,000 cash. Also, right now, there's 2 for 1. Buy 1, get 2, buy 5, get 10, and so on. And use code INSPIRE, because that's what you do, Yaakov. You inspire thousands of people, Baruch Hashem.
So kind of you.
Inspire, and you get $10 off. So it really is a great deal. This is our 8th year. The one who won last year, a young couple from West Hempstead, very close to where you're recording right now. So this is a beautiful thing, an unbelievable brand new apartment, fully furnished in the heart of Yerushalayim. You can walk to the Kotel, you can walk to Machane Yehuda, you can walk to the Yeshivas Hebron. It's about 2 blocks away from the famous Yeshivas Hebron in the heart of Yerushalayim. Beautiful apartment worth $1.2 million. All you need is thedreamraffle.com, code INSPIRE, and you could win the apartment of a lifetime.
And I have a good feeling about it because I always have a feeling a listener is going to actually win. And I feel it strongly this year. And what's really cool about it is even if someone doesn't win the apartment, everyone is a winner because all the money goes to such a beautiful cause. Can you tell us about where this money goes towards?
Sure. The money this year, we're focusing on Jewish unity because everybody's talking about that's really, really what we need. And not just after a wartime, not just after, October 7th, but we really need Jewish unity. And Am Yisrael Chai, which is the organization that's behind the Dream Raffle, we support unbelievable causes, whether it's Haredi Kollels, or it's helping people with food, soup kitchens, completely irreligious, secular Jews in Ramla and Sderot. We have programs of teens at risk. We have the only yeshiva in the Jordan Valley, the boys' yeshiva in the Jordan Valley, with the biggest supporter. We're supporting search and rescue efforts, incredible projects throughout Israel. It's all on our website, and you can take a look at it, thedreamraffle.com. There is pictures of the apartment that you can see fully furnished, all of the projects that we have. It's really Kodesh HaKodeshim, and you could support and also win the apartment of your dreams. Hence, the Dream Raffle.
Really love it. Thedreamraffle.com. Use code word INSPIRE, and maybe we'll do a podcast out of there one day. You never know, because you might be the next winner.
You got it.
And the next day, I ended up going to Shul. I was very nervous at that point because at that point I was told there's a good chance you're going to prison. And I told my wife what was going on. Coming home from Shul, actually a close friend of mine, Dr. Mark Meiser, said, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Yeah, not a problem. There's some things in my mind." He's a super, super incredible person. And and in a way, I guess I was trying to, I don't want to be mean. I was trying to get rid of anybody. I didn't want anybody to be connected with me at that point. And I got home. It's early. I go to a Hashkama minyan, and we had guests over. And at 12 noon, it's like high noon, I call it, 3 black sedans pull up into our driveway. And I watch as they're coming to the door, 7 FBI agents with guns. My daughter, Nechami, was like about 4.5 years old at the time. My son, Yudalei, was about 1.5 years. And they had a search warrant. The lead agent, special agent James Cugino, comes in, and he literally says, "I don't know what I'm doing here. I told them not to do this." And he walks in. My wife runs past him and says, "I got to go. I'm going to go get Stuart. Whatever. I'm going to go." And you can't leave the house. Once they're in there,
no one's allowed to leave.
No one's allowed. They can, my attorney told me after, they can take you, put you on the floor face down, cuff you and hold you there till they're done. And my wife, I give her credit. She just looked at him and said, "I'm going, I got to go." And he just let her go.
Wow. And
while she was going down the block, Stuart was in the middle of making Kiddush. He had his kid, he told us what happened after. So his wife said, he had his Kiddush cup in hand, sees them coming, tells Jen, "Hey, got to go," puts it down. She's coming this way. They meet each other along the way. Stuart comes, so I have an attorney present, and they come in and they start taking her house apart. Actually, the good thing is, never happens. They told Marty Crandall, my attorney, they were coming, and he actually drives up pretty much at the same time. Now, we had no idea, are they going to start manufacturing evidence, putting things where maybe some documents that we had no idea what was going on. It was like, and they were literally going through our things. And I remember my wife, at that point, they're going into our bedroom, taking out things, taking apart. It was a breach. It's a breach of everything. They wouldn't speak to me directly. Literally, I'd be speaking to you. You're looking at me. My attorney's over here. He would speak to my attorney. My attorney would ask me the same question. And I'd go back and forth like this. And they said, "We want your passport." And I carry 2 passports. As an Army employee, I carry red passports and a blue passport. I gave him one of my passports. And I'm thinking, "Oh, shouldn't he have asked for both of them?" Okay, it's no big deal. And he's leaving. And they spent a good portion of the time over at my house. We offered them some shalt also. And they left. It took them about, I'm guessing, 5, 6, 7 hours. I don't even remember at this point. And I asked my attorney as they were leaving, I said, "Marty, they going to follow me or anything like that?" He said, "Nah, at this point in time, what are they going to do? They know where you're here and everything else." And I got up the next morning to go to shul. And it's still dark out. And as I turn my lights on and my car on, I see some lights go on down the block. And I said, "They're following me." And I literally, 24/7 for 6 months. They followed me everywhere I went. They followed my wife too. Very short period of time because they got tired of doing carpool. And I believe because they waiting off the line and the mother's in line waiting to drop their kids off. And it was literally to a point where this is the story I tell everybody. So someone asked me, they said, when did you know you were really, really in trouble? And I said, well, there are different points in time, but I had to deal with the fact they took all my documents out of the house. I know documents for taxes. They took all my mail. They didn't even open it, but when we got back later on, they took anything, my bills and things like that. And I told my wife, I said, I have to call the IRS. I mean, what am I supposed to do? So I go down the basement and I got a hold of the IRS right away. That's NACE number 1. The fact you got a hold of the IRS, I wasn't on hold. And you can tell it's a very nice, older black woman on the phone. And she said, what's your name? I told her, what's my social security number? I told her, and I said, I don't have my documents. She comes back and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Tenenbaum, but we don't have your documents anymore. Another agency has them. May God be with you. And I said, but you don't understand. How am I supposed? May God be with you and bless you. And she hung up. And I go back upstairs and my wife says to me, how did it go? I said, I think we're in trouble. I just got a bracha from the IRS. And she looked at me and I said, I'm not kidding. And I don't remember the order of different things, but I remember on that, after this whole fiasco of the FBI going to my house, I remember I had to be somewhere. And to this day, I don't tell people where I was, but I had to do something for the case. And it was at night and I called my wife. I said, I'm coming home. And she says, no, you're not. I said, I'm not coming to take out the garbage. What do you mean I'm not coming home? She says, there's cameramen all over our lawn. There's TV cameras. There's journalists. There's all these people. And I found out later that when the FBI puts everything through the system, the court system, they forgot to seal my file. Oh my gosh, what a mistake. They seal common drug busts, but they forgot to seal my file. Obviously, it was done purposely. But what it did is it put an X on me. Literally, it put an X on me. At that point, they had my house was on the internet, my address, everything. Literally was on the internet. We were inundated with people calling. I couldn't go home. My attorney said to me, you can't go home because at this point your life's in danger. There's somebody could take a pot shot at you and try to kill you. And my wife didn't tell me till later on that, yes, indeed, she had a call that someone had screamed traitor on the phone and hung up. And we had to deal with all this going on. It took years for my daughter, who's 4.5, people would just ring the doorbell, normal people would want to come in and she would scream, don't open the door. You don't know who it is. It took years to get over that. And eventually, as this is going on, I was told by friends of mine and people in the know that you're going to go to jail. You're going to prison. There's a good chance that they don't go after people just to say, okay, we'll give up on this. And I was told there was a faction from Simonini's side that says he needs to go to jail, prison, for the rest of his life. And the FBI guy was saying, well, something's wrong here. There's something sure about it. And afterwards, I found out through discovery, my colleagues would complain to the FBI and said, he is a spy. We knew he was a spy. We can tell he was a spy because he'd speak Hebrew. We knew it was going to come down to this. And everybody, all of a sudden's on the bandwagon, get rid of him, get him put in jail. And even to the point when we eventually were suing the government, I had a different attorney at that point, and I was downtown outside the federal courthouse with one of my attorneys, not Jewish, and he said, Tenenbaum, you should be in jail right now. You should be in prison for the rest of your life, if not the death penalty. And I said, Juan, I didn't do anything wrong. You know I didn't do anything wrong. He said, that's not the way it works. I know you're innocent, but the way the government works is that if they're going after somebody, they are going to put them away. He said, I don't know why you're not in jail right now. I said, I don't know what prompted me to the thought. I said, the difference between me and you, Juan, is that you're an atheist and I believe in God. And if it's supposed to be this way, then it'll be this way. But if not, it's not going to be. And even to the point where I would go to some people for help. I said, I went to somebody, I said, you've got a connection here. Real high level connection. Could you help me? And make the connection for me. And he said to me, I would, but I don't want to get them, you don't want to get them mad at you. I said, they want to put me in the electric chair. How am I going to get them any madder at me? And he kind of looked at me and says, no, it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. And they didn't help. Eventually I got it. So I'm skipping but even I'll tell you one last point. I used to take walks with two different people. One of them, another one's another friend of mine. We walk at night because it's the only time, because I wasn't sure. And because they would station these cars are all over the blocks. And one was literally down the block from me. And they were supposed to be covert, but I had little kids coming up to me. Oh, Dr. Tenenbaum, there's a car over here, just so you know. Oh, there's a car on this street over here. Just you want to take a different route to go somewhere. And it reached a point where I had people, I didn't put them up to this. The community who was totally with me were following the FBI. They would literally, if the FBI car would start to go, they would follow them. And FBI literally threatened them, physically threatened some of these people. And it was a point where we would take pictures also. And I kept a camera with me all the time. And I was walking home one time, walking with this person, and I hear the car start. And it was like, it's pointed this way towards you. We're walking this way. And then I hear the red engine revving up. And it literally, the guy hit the accelerator, who had the lights on to blind us, turned them off and came right at us. He was trying to kill us or kill me. He was just, the other friend of mine was just collateral damage. And I think I jumped, I literally dived out of the way. I got a great picture of the guy behind the wheel like this. And I'm like, that was a great picture afterwards. And eventually we told the FBI this, and the FBI actually complained to the prosecutor's office and said that, the community's interfering, and they're interfering with an investigation. And the prosecutor's office called my attorney and said, and my attorney called and said, what are you guys doing? I told him. He said, yeah, they don't like that. I said, oh, that's too bad. This is what's going on. I was eventually cleared to the point where I was given a letter that from the prosecutor's office that if there was anything here, we would have found it, but there was nothing here. With millions, and I say millions of dollars were put into this investigation. We sued the government, and to skip around a lot on this, we went through discovery, 2.5 years of discovery, and it showed the anti-Semitism that people were coming out of the woodwork. My colleagues were coming out of the woodwork on this whole thing. And in a deposition, John Simonini was across the table, sitting like you across the table. His attorney was with him, the government attorney. I was with my attorney. The stenographer was sitting at the head of the table. I don't remember the question that was asked, but paraphrase, his answer to the question was, that's what Jews do, like for spying. That's part of their culture. And I just kind of looked at my attorney. I said, did he just say what I think he said? And I looked at the stenographer. She was typing. She looked up. She stopped typing. Never, ever saw this. His attorney kind of looked at him kind of like one like this, pulled him out of the room. And a week later, they invoked the state secrets privilege, which means you can't sue the government because it's a state secret. It's classified material that they have to reveal. We went to the Supreme Court, couldn't get through. And we did our best, to the point where we also went to the Inspector General's office from the Department of Defense. Carl Levin, the senator from Michigan, got involved. We asked him, we said, this is anti-Semitism. Can you do something about it? We'd like an investigation. He got back to us, it was Purim, I got a letter, and said, I've spoke to the Inspector General's office. Your case is going to be, initially it was number 1,000 out of the cases. Your case is now number 2. The number 1 case was, I don't know if you remember years ago, there's a football player that after 9/11 that decided he wanted to enlist, and he gave up $1 million career to enlist, and he was killed by friendly fire. His case was number 1, my case was number 2. And it was supposed to take 6 months. Come to find out, after a couple years, things were just slow. And I had a contact there. I was calling him, so what was going on. And in that span of time, I was getting documents. No return address at all. It was coming to us and was telling us things that were going on. find out they were like neo-Nazis, alleged neo-Nazis in the Inspector General's office. Like, what they were trying to block the report. The report showed it was anti-Semitism, and they didn't want it to come out. There was a guy there, Ulrich Fury, who was like the top attorney there, and he was one of the main guys there. He was appointed by a previous Inspector General, and all this alleged type of things. But this previous Inspector General was asked or kind of resigned. I don't know if he resigned or he actually was fired, but he was fired or resigned because he was going to attend, using government funds, a birthday party in Germany. Would you like to know whose birthday party in Germany?
His birthday party.
Hitler. He was going to attend the party. They found out and they decided, you need to leave. And he, on his way out, as the story goes, allegedly, he said there were two main accomplishments I had in my tenure as Inspector General. One was I got rid of all the Jews in the building. The other one was I appointed Ulrich Fury as my attorney, for the Inspector General's office, who was one of the main people trying to block the report. There was supposed to be one report that came out. There were 5 different reports that were done at different points in time. The Inspector General himself was he was, I think it was like a born-again Christian, an older gentleman, and he saw that he was being undermined by his own attorneys who were trying to change the report around. And the report finally that came out that was for us, I believe the guy that Dan Meyer, who was the investigator in my case, he had told me at one point he was going on vacation, he was going to take vacation, and he assumed that the report was going to be signed. And I think at one point he said, I have to ask him, but at one point he said, if this is not signed, I'm going to be going to all the different news outlets and tell them exactly what's going on. I could be wrong. I don't remember exactly. But the Inspector General had to sign that. He was resigning. He was so disgusted with the people in his office. He said he was resigning. He had to sign that by midnight of the day he was resigning. Otherwise, it goes back again another years to be dealt with and to be investigated. He signed it with a few minutes to spare. The report went out, and it was I think July of 2008, I believe. And the next day it went out. It was on all the major newspapers. And in my base, when I was brought back, I really wasn't given a whole lot to do, and I had a fight to get. And I was told they're going to get rid of you if you don't find something to do. And I was in one of the offices of that day. The newspapers, everybody's reading the newspaper, what happened. The Inspector General is all anti-Semitism. One person looked at me and said, "This is your fault." I said, "What do you mean? My fault? Excuse me?" He says, "Yeah, it's your fault. It's your fault. This is what happened. You did this." My fault because people don't like Jews. And I just said, I don't have to deal with this. And I remember pretty much right after that, I was called into the guy I was working for his office and said, I have to sort of backtrack. When I was brought back to work, they revoked my security clearance soon thereafter. And I had to fight to get it back. Very rarely did anybody get back their security clearance. And I had to go in front of a judge. My attorneys at that time, Morgenroth, Dan Harold, Mike was just incredible. As an older gentleman, he took my case on as a pro bono because he was so ticked off at what happened. He and Dan also. I still stay in touch to this day. And we had this literally piles of documents because the judge said, "Oh, this ought to take a few minutes to go through." I mean, he was so blatantly against me. And we spent 8 hours there and we still weren't done. He said, "I guess we're going to have to come back." So the date was set. My youngest son was born. Bris was going to be held the day that was supposed to happen. I called him up. I said, "Hey, look, I really need to change this because of this." He says, "We're not changing the date. The date was set before your son was born. They're not said the bris was supposed to be that day." So I went back to my Robert Jacobitz at that point, and he said, "Okay, we'll just do a Nate's The earliest, nobody's. I was joking for my wife. That's the first time she had to get up, to go to Nate's. We had the bris, and then a friend of mine, an attorney, actually drove me downtown to make it on time. So this all happened, but eventually I got my security clearance back, and they upgraded it, which was a ace in itself because nobody thought I'd ever get my security clearance back. No one at all. And when I was called into this guy's office after the report came out, he said, you need to take a drug test. This is right after the report comes out. I said, a drug test? Yeah, it's a random drug test. We just have to do a random drug test. I said, well, what do you mean? Well, you have a high-level security clearance, so people who have high-level security clearances are randomly drug tested. Really? I said, when was the last random drug test that you did? I don't know if I've ever done one. I don't remember. I said, well, you set the date up, and I just want to go back to my office and do a couple things. So I sent an email to him. I copy-furnished my attorney. I copy-furnished Senator Levin and a few other congressional people. And I copy-furnished some people at 60 Minutes who I was familiar with. And lo and behold, I sent it to him. I never had a drug test. I don't know what happened. I guess they just changed their minds. And at that point also, I was told, you need to go in for this training in this conference room, which is already going on. And I get to the conference room. There's like 50 people sitting around a conference room table. I come in, one of the last ones in. They told me about the last minute. I'm sitting at the head of the table with the guy I was working for at the time and somebody else. And there's a voice coming through the system. This guy couldn't make it. There's no video, just audio. And he has to be there at least audibly. And he's talking and he says, hey, I saw this newspaper thing about this Tenenbaum guy, this spy guy. What did he do? What happened? There's all this thing. And he's talking. I'm looking around there, but it's kind of embarrassing. And nobody's saying anything. He doesn't see me. He doesn't see anybody. And I'm looking at his boss. I'm looking at my boss. No one's saying a word. And he said, yeah, the spy guy Tenenbaum. I said, okay, nobody's saying anything. I'll say something. I said, well, if you have any questions, you can just ask me. And he said, well, who the heck are you? I said, I'm Tenenbaum. And he said, oh. And I looked at the guy next to me, his boss. I said, you need to speak to him. And he said, I'm not speaking to anybody. And I looked at this guy, the boss of everybody, and he said, I'll take care of it. And supposedly he did, but it doesn't matter. It was out there because keep in mind, when I came back when I was forced to come back to work, I didn't want to come back. And I had to go in, and then you asked me if I was nervous. Then I was nervous, angry, call it whatever you like. I walked into, they told me I had to walk in. I couldn't get in. I had no badge. So I had to go into where everybody waits for somebody to come pick them up. They could pick me up, and I go in. I won't go through that. That was a fiasco in itself. You can look in the book and see that was like a joke. And everybody apparently was briefed beforehand, my colleagues who already knew what they said about me. And they were briefed on, oh yeah, treat him nicely, treat him, just make sure you're nice to him. And little did I know, the guy that I was going to be working for, or one of the people I was working for, was telling everybody, make sure you lock all the doors, classified materials locked away, everything's locked away. And somebody else is telling people, oh yeah, stay away from Tenenbaum, he's trouble. And I didn't know any of this at the time. I found out a lot of this later on. And I was given secretarial work to do. And one guy was a former person I work with, and I'm walking back somewhere with him. He's looking at me, and I looked at him. I said, you seem to be a little nervous. He said, yeah, I don't want to be seen with you. I don't want them to do to me what they did to you. I said, all right, no problem. And that's the way I was treated. I actually had somebody say to me, I'm not going to work with you. The only way I work with you is if I investigated you myself and looked into you. Because as far as we know, there was an investigation, and they just didn't have enough evidence. Otherwise, you would be in jail right now, so I'm not working with you. And I said, wow, so much for that. And they kept putting it with different people, and it reached the point I was given somebody to work with, and I'd be sitting at my desk, and this guy would come around, like in the morning, saying, good morning, whatever, go all along. And someone comes up to me that I was friendly with, said, he's checking to see if you're at your desk. I said, no. I didn't know that. When he came to my desk one time, it was like, I was supposed to be there at 7 o'clock. I think it was 7:01. He said, "Oh, Tenenbaum, 7:01. So you want to take that vacation time, or do you want to take that as just leave? How do you want to take that?" I said, 1 minute. "Oh yeah, 1 minute. We're gonna take that from you." And I'm thinking to myself, this guy's off the wall. And I was out sick at one point, and I came back in. He said, "Well, we need a note from your doctor." I said, "This is getting better and better." And I'm in his office, and I said, "Well, I got the note, I got the letter." And he said, I looked him up." I said, you did what?" He said, "Yeah, I looked him up. This is a friend of mine. So he checked me out, it's a cardiologist, whatever." And he said, "Yeah, there's no such person as Mark Meisner, Dr. Meisner." I said, "Do you want me to tell him that, or you want to tell him that?" And he says, "Yeah, there's no such person." I think he actually even got the number, his house phone, called his house. I remember. And I said, "He's not just a cardiologist, he's an electrophysiologist cardiologist. Do you know what that is? Do you want me to spell it for you when you want to buy a vowel or something?" And he said, "No, it's and I went back to my desk, called the guy who was like the head of this whole area. And I said, "Here's what we're going to do. I will not work for him anymore." And I went to his office. I just walked into his office. So I'm not working for him anymore. He's just supposed to be my gatekeeper. It's not going to happen like this. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of problems here. He said, "You're working for me now directly," because it was getting worse.
The most inspiring part of my conversation with David is coming up. But if you trust me, Yaakov Linger, you know I only share what actually works. Buying or leasing a car can be a nightmare. Dealers play games, tack on hidden fees, and before you know it, you've overpaid by thousands. That's why I personally use Wheels to Lease. They've been doing this for over 35 years and have completely changed how people get cars. No pressure, no gimmicks. Just tell them what you want and they'll track down the best deal on any make or any model. New or used, lease, finance, they handle it all and deliver straight to your door. I use them myself and I send friends to them and everyone comes back saying how happy they are. They say, "That was the easiest car experience ever, and I saved a lot of money." So before you walk into a dealership or give someone else a call, give Wheels to Lease a call at 718-871-8715. Send them an email at inspire@wheelstolease.com. Or, of course, you could go to their website, wheelstolease.com/inspire. Save time, save thousands, and drive so much smarter. Now, we're going to jump right back in. But last week, I was at the BitBean office and they showed me a system they built for a real estate company that was drowning in spreadsheets. Every lease, rent payment, lender report lived in a different file. And I don't really know much about real estate, but I did know this. They were constantly playing catch up, tracking who paid, who didn't, and which properties were falling behind. BitBean built them a custom platform designed specifically for their workflow. It wasn't an off-the-shelf product. It was tailor-made for their business. The system automatically tracks rent, flags delinquencies, and manages payments and keeps every property detail organized and accessible. And what used to take days of manual work now happens instantly and accurately. And that's what BitBean does. They build powerful custom software that transforms the way businesses operate. Whether you manage multifamily, retail, industrial assets, or maybe nothing in real estate. Maybe it's the healthcare space. Maybe it's you make tissues. I don't know. BitBean creates systems that eliminate inefficiencies, reduce risk, and help you stay ahead of everything, from rent rolls to reporting to everything on the back end. If you're ready to run your real estate business or any business through bitbean.com, your life will change because no two portfolios are alike and your software solution should not be either. Go to bitbean.com and get the solution that you deserve.
I put up with things people put. I found pork rinds on my desk one time. I wear my yarmulke. They know who I am. They know everybody knows Jews don't eat pork. I had one guy ask me, I came back from Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and he says to me, "What do you guys do during your holidays?" And I said, "Well, we contemplate, how to make ourselves better people. We ask forgiveness from people. We look into, we're in synagogue most of the day." And as I'm saying this to him, his jaw is dropping. He's like looking at me. And finally he blurts out, "Are you crazy?" He says, "We go out, we get drunk. We blow off firecrackers. We do this, we do that." I'm like, "Well, that's what makes us different." I didn't say that to him, but that's what makes us different in general. Eventually, skipping all through the years, we did go to Car 11. The report came out. The Army said, "We don't have to do anything about it." And eventually we went to a couple senators who wrote a letter for us, the Army, and great letters, and that said, you guys got to fix this. It's the Inspector General's supposed to do the investigation, and then there should be some type of remuneration or something. But they can't do anything. They can only say we rule like this, but they have no clause after that. And they never did anything. We could still go back to them and they can do something, but it's got to be someone that's going to say, do something about it. And the Army said, we're not doing anything about it, but it's anti-Semitism. So what? We don't have to do anything about it. And I've been over the last number of years, I've been working on programs. The last program that I was working on that I told you about with the Germans and Israelis, which protect soldiers, Sanity canceled it, stopped it. And my attorney actually said, Mike Morgan said, they have blood on their hands. He was doing interviews because we said at the time, if you don't do something about it, soldiers will die. I was actually in a meeting that I had to go to in a different state, which I won't tell you who, I don't tell you where. I was with some other people. And in this state, this person was in charge of this. She knew exactly what happened to the soldiers in vehicles that were hit by an IED. When I say exactly, she knew exactly. And after that meeting, I was shown things that I knew exactly what happened to. It's embedded in my memory. It's embedded in my mind. I will never forget it. And she looked at me, and she was high level. She was a doctor also, a physician. And she said, you are in charge of building vehicles that protect our soldiers. You didn't do your job. Why didn't you do your job? And I could barely look at her. I said, I tried. I did the best I could. I said, I told them what was going to happen. I told them that they would not survive. And I told them soldiers would not only not survive, they'd come back in pieces. And as we could see here, they did. And she said, what happened to the people that stopped the program? I said, they got promoted. They got awards. Somebody got promoted. The polygrapher got awards. And this is what we're left with. And I just remember, and again, I'm forgetting so many different things. And even at a point where you think that nobody knows really what's happening, and nobody knows at this point. It's gone on for so long, nobody knows what's going on. But probably within the span of time when things are really happening, keep in mind, I was like, someone said to me, well, how did it affect your life in general? I said, well, I wasn't there for my family. I was concentrating on staying out of jail. I was concentrating on trying to get as much information as possible. And I lost time with my kids. I never get that back. I lost time with my wife, my kids. I'll never get it back. And it's even today, 2 of my kids won't read the book because of the effect. They weren't even born at the time, but the effect it had on them. One of my sons said to me at one point, he said, you don't even realize the effect it had on us. And he wasn't even born. I remember we took a trip when I was able to go on a trip. We had to go through Cleveland, and we stopped off in a pizza place in Cleveland. And I will never, ever forget this. And I gave my credit card to the person, the owner, and he looks at me and he looks at my credit card. He sees the name on the credit card. This is pretty much when it's a couple years within happening. And he looks at me and says, are you an engineer? I said, yeah. You work for the Army? I said, yeah. He said, you're the guy that was accused of treason? I said, yeah. He said, you know, we were all saying Tehillim for you. Everybody here. I never met them. I never knew. And I didn't know what was going on. I was told this was going on all over the world. People were saying Tehillim and people were davening for me. And I thought, it just chokes me up thinking about how Kol Yisrael Ravim Zelazah. I mean, I remember the night before the FBI came. I learned, I do my whatever, and I couldn't sleep. And I got up. The first time in my life, I said all of Tehillim. And I, like 2 or 3 hours, I was just saying Tehillim all night. And to think that someone else who doesn't even know me is concerned about me and cares about myself and my family, it was amazing to me. Eventually, over to this, I'll skip around a lot.
Sure.
We're still trying to get things going. I'm trying to because of the way it's working nowadays, that Trump's in charge, and the way there are congressional people that are very pro-Israel. I'm trying to reach out to people now. It's been very difficult. About 3 years ago, I was working for some people who were doing some things which we'll say that's called fraud, waste, and abuse. And I I wrote up a report for the Inspector General's office. I turned them in. And I get a call in the middle of the night. And this guy calls me and is whispering on the phone. He says, I want to tell you, that investigation, it's going to be done, but it's going to have to be done by an outside base, an outside command. Can't be done inside. There's too many connections. These guys will get off scot-free. I said, yeah, of course, it can't be done. A week later, he calls me back. He said, I don't know what happened. The investigation's going to be on the base itself. They investigated themselves.
Oh my gosh.
They literally investigated. Well, guess how that investigation turned out?
Oh, they're clean.
Yeah, nothing happened, nothing wrong. I never got the results from it, but yeah, they're nothing wrong. And then I was told by the guy that went through this, because something else had happened previously. I was working on a project dealing with PTSD and suicide prevention. I'm still trying to get that project going with that, using technology to help PTSD. And because suicide's a big thing in the military, and especially now with what's going on in Israel, it's a terrible, terrible thing. But I found out, I was told there's a guy that's doing this work in another state. And, I called him and he said, oh yeah, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to do this one thing. We need somebody from your base to work with. He's a former colonel, is an MD. And he said, yeah, and you're a paramedic. I worked as a paramedic also. You'd be great to add on to our program. You're working from your base, of course. It's your whatever. I said, yeah. So he and I, we were exchanging information over a couple of weeks, and I briefed him. He briefed me, and I called him up one week, and he said, I'm not working with you. I said, what do you mean not working with me? He said, not working with you. He said, I Googled your name. I'm not working with you. I said, well, what did you find out? He said, doesn't matter. I Googled your name. Well, I said, if you Google my name, you also found out that I was cleared of any wrongdoing. I did nothing wrong. And he said, well, it's not my job to see who's right and wrong. I said, actually, that's already been taken care of, that the people that did this, they're wrong. And he said, well, I'm not working with you. Told him the guy I was working for at the time, who I actually turned in later on. And he said, I'll look into it, write it up. I wrote it up. He came back, it took a few months, comes back and says, well, he said he didn't do it, and you violated a number of regulations. So we're writing you up for violating regulations. I said, what? I said, what? You're kidding me. This guy has refused to work with me because I'm a Jew and because of what happened, and I violated regulations. He said, yeah. He said, I could really write you up for some terrible things, but I'm going to take it easy on you. I said, well, gee whiz, thanks. And I said, I'll take care of it. And after I turned him in and he was cleared by himself, he said, I think it'd be a good idea if you worked in a different area. So you're going to work for so-and-so. He works for me, but you're going to work for so. You keep your old programs. Don't worry about it. I went over to, it's everything's on paper, no big deal. And he says to me, this other new guy says, yeah, we need somebody to do, paraphrasing, count radios for us and count some pencils and do computer modeling for us. I said, you realize the work I've done before, I'm not a computer modeler. And how many engineers you have working for you? None. How many with doctorates? None. You're being insubordinate. We're writing you up. And it was just downhill from there to the point where he said, we're sending you to this place in Upper Michigan for 2 weeks. I said, well, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I can't really go. I told him about minyanim, and I told him about kosher food. And I sent an email that I said, if you need somebody to talk to, I'll give you a name of one of my rabbis. He gets back and says, well, I Googled it. I did some research. It's okay. You can go. I'm like, wow. Rabbi Google really is getting better and better at this. Maybe try ChatGPT or whatever else. And it was literally anything I did. It was terrible. I got terrible ratings. When my book came out, all of a sudden I got a horrendous rating. I complained. The union person actually told the guy that gave me the terrible rating. He said, "You're taking revenge. You can't. It's retaliation. You're not allowed to do that." Oh no, we can do this. And it was like all these terrible ratings, and it reached the point where it happened over and over again until finally, I'm not going to get into all the details, but finally, about 3 years ago, right around Sukkot time, I get a letter in the mail, it says, because my guys working for us said, come on into the office. Because COVID, people weren't coming in as much. My wife had a COVID, so I wasn't allowed to go, couldn't go in. Yeah, come in, bring your laptop. We'll go in. It's a government laptop. Come in, we go over some things. And I said, I can't, the rules, regulations, I can't come in. Plus I gotten hurt. Like I told you, I had a slight concussion, and next thing I know, I get a letter, and I didn't understand it. I called my attorney. I said, Steve, I said, did I just get fired? And he looks and says, I don't know. I don't understand it. Now, Steve's a pretty bright guy. And he says, let me talk to the union guy. So he gets sensitive to the union guy, tells the union guy, what's this about? He says, I don't know. I don't understand it. Let me speak to the government people. Turns out I was removed from government service. A nice way of saying you've been fired. And there's a whole way you do this. They didn't follow any rules. And their basic way of looking at it is saying that it's better to fight it from the outside, because at that point, I'm not getting a salary. I can't touch pension. I have no medical. I can't touch my 401k. So the way we call it delay, deny, defend, and death. The government tries to delay going to court as much as possible. They deny it. They'll defend themselves and hope you die before. It's actually a well-known thing before this comes to a court. So we were supposed to go to arbitration, and this is 3 years ago, and they pushed it aside as much as possible. And hopefully it will go maybe the next few months. But in the meantime, it's not. It's whatever's supposed to be is supposed to be. I don't look at things and say, "Well, poor me." This is the way we plan. Hashem has his way of acting towards us, and said, "Okay, Tenenbaum, this is what you're supposed to go deal with now. Now deal with it." I tell people my wife is the one that's had to deal with it. My kids are the ones that have to deal with it more than me, because I understand it, but they're great. The fact that I've had the community backing me has just been amazing. And the fact that my family's backed me, because I know of cases I'm considered a whistleblower too. I know of whistleblower cases. When I was writing my dissertation, I ended up, I interviewed people for my dissertation, and you'll even see in the book some people that they're living in trailers. Their wives divorced them. Their kids don't talk to them. And I'm thinking to myself, but that didn't happen to me. I could have been left out in the street, but I didn't have that. My community, my family backed me to the hilt. And I really feel bad for a lot of these people. So we're waiting right now for to go to arbitration. And I would like someone to say, we messed up. That'll never happen. But when someone literally says from their side, paraphrasing, "Oh, we don't want just him out in the street. We want him basically living out of a box." This is their revenge for, God forbid, someone should disagree with what the government saying, and to say for the government people to say, we really it could have been taken care of a long time ago. We messed up. Here's what we'll do for you. Are you okay with that? Instead, it's digging your heels in more and more. There are evil people in this world. Doesn't mean everybody's evil, but the problem is the people that are in charge of making these decisions, they're evil people.
It's just a shame, because, you're someone who clearly, loves your country, loves America, and you're trying to, help the soldiers with the vehicles. And not only do they not listen to you, they waste all your time and all that money on trying to get you, while there really are bad people in America who are spying for other places, I'm sure, and they're putting all their resources towards nothing, basically.
That's correct. As a matter of fact, my tax dollars are fighting me because I pay into the federal government. And the biggest problem, it felt good because there was a meeting a few years ago. It was on like a Zoom meeting. I was there with my attorney and the union guy who was like one of the vice presidents, and he was a former military person himself. And I'll never forget, he's not Jewish, but I never forget what he said. He was yelling at their attorney and the two people he says, "How many people do you have that have technology that was sent overseas from this command?" And because I had worked on another project, it was called the gunner restraint system. And what it was basically doing, and I'll explain that if you want, but he was basically saying, Dr. Tenenbaum saved lives. How many of your other people that have done that where you're working and nobody said a thing? Nobody. I felt like weird. Somebody speaking, nice about me because I'm just another person. I had an idea and I tried it. And I remember when I started that project, the guy that came up to me, I was working for him at the time, and he said, we've got a problem. Soldiers and Humvees, the gunners, are being ejected from the vehicles. And they're either the vehicles are turning over and crushing them, or they're being ejected, and at 50 miles an hour, you don't do too well. And he said, can you do something about it? And would you go to a meeting? I said, yeah, I'll go to a meeting. I went over, I said, you do realize I was working on that a year before because this is the way it works. And they were trying to get rid of me. So this is after the last program. The person in charge cut my funding, said it's not important. And this is what they all of a sudden, soldiers are getting killed. Kids are getting killed. I went to the meeting, came back. So my boss said to me, so what do you think? I said, well, I think it's political. I think the only reason they're doing it now, because I told them a year ago that this is a problem. And the only reason they're doing it now, it's political, because Senator Levin was involved with this one. And the parents of the kids that had died, or the husbands and wives, were complaining. And he looked at me and started screaming at me. Literally screaming, said, don't you ever say that. Don't you ever speak like that. He said, and I said, but it's true. He said, I know it's true, but you can't say it. Wow. You can't say it. It's political. And that's what's going on, I think, with myself. It's political, but
are you because what happened with you, clearly based on nothing, but they thought that you're spying for Israel. Does that make you, in the past bunch of years, not be able to visit Israel? Do you speak less Hebrew now because of like the craziness of you seeing how crazy they are?
So I'll answer like this. At one point, I think it was Nahami that was going to Israel and a seminary. And I don't believe I had gone at that point since the thing happened. So I went to Rabbi Eisenberger and I said, we talked about and he said, don't worry, you can go, but don't take anything for anybody. Nothing. It's sure. Like, anything for your family is one thing, but don't take anything else. And that's what I did. And I have actually asked, I've gone since then. I've actually, when October 7th happened, I worked as a paramedic for over 20 years off and on. And there was this one group, I forgot the organization that was looking for people. And I went as a medical volunteer to Israel a couple times since October 7th. I didn't do as much as I would like, but I went, and it was just an amazing experience, because seeing people going through LL security, because LL was only one flying there, and when you're telling them why, because they ask you why you're going, you tell them, they kind of look up at you, because obviously I wear my yarmulke and the other people are coming, and they said, you're coming to help? I said, yeah. And there were a number of other people coming from like thousands of miles away, and she was crying. Huh. And she said, the fact, because Kol Yisrael Ravim Zelazeh. And I said, of course, we're all going to come. And the briefings we were getting from different people, one of the women there also says that she couldn't believe that you said, you guys are coming from all over to help. And it was an amazing experience. And the other part too, you should know, I don't take things for people. It's not because I don't want to, but because there's different issues. Because I have been pulled aside. I'll be honest, I haven't pulled aside. In normal flights, I get pulled aside. And I ended up, I send in resumes. You think there's no residual effect. I've probably sent in 200, 250 resumes. And I think I have a decent resume. And I have, maybe one place was interested in me. They Google your name right away. And even at one point, and Nahami gets a little bit, she thinks I'm a little crazy. I got turned down within 20 minutes. She said, what's so funny? I said, because you have to recognize we don't control the world. It's like, there's a higher entity. As Hashem's controls, not to sound for front, but there's a higher entity. And whatever it's supposed to be is going to be. If I'm supposed to get that job, I'm going to get that job. If I'm not, I'm not. So in the meantime, I've been changing careers, and yes, I still put in resumes. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but I decided to become a nurse. And I worked in an ER before, and I've worked on the street as an ER, and I think, I can actually work in an ER, go back and work now, and actually just was given a job 2 weeks ago. As soon as I graduated, I'm working in an ER in one of the major trauma centers in Detroit. So for me, it's like I can still do things and I can still help people, which is what I want to do.
Mm.
Now, I'd love to be able to connect. I sent some of my books. Somebody said, this one person who knows the system says, here's where you need to send the books, and send a letter with it. And I sent it to different senators and congressmen. I wish I can connect with someone like Trump or Trump in his inner cabinet, because I think this is something that he would go for, because he wouldn't put up with, I don't believe a lot of the Congress wouldn't put up with the anti-Semitism, which is still going on, and the blocking my case from going through. So, and by the way, I'm not the only person who went through this. I'm the only person that became the government was careful. I got calls from different people when my case was going on from guys. And they said, we're going through something similar. They're going to take our security clearance. What do we do? I said, you have to fight. You have to do something. I said, well, we fight, we're going to get them mad. Another, we're going to get them mad at me. I said, well, if you don't fight, you're going to lose your clearance. So getting mad, it doesn't matter. You're going to lose. So you might as well go out fighting. And my father would have said, yeah, just do it. Do what you got to do.
I think you mentioned Trump. I think aside for the fact that obviously Trump is against anti-Semitism, and his own daughter and son-in-law are Jewish, and his Jewish grandkids, but even aside for that, he's a businessman at heart. Like,
correct.
Everything you explained to me seems like very poor business. Like, you want the army to be as strong as possible. You want them to be focused on the right cases. Like, it's not good for the success of America to be having this hinky-pinky going on. That's
an excellent point, and it's true. Because one of the things I actually said to an attorney that I know recently, I said, I know technology, and I know Israel especially, I do know the things, and I could save money, I could build technology, which is what I'm trying to do even now. I started my own company a while ago, but once this happened, you're not going to get many takers. But I believe I can help. And as a business person, I think it's important to recognize that there's better ways of handling things. And if you want to, I made a joke to somebody when Trump was going in and started firing people right and left years ago, when they weren't going to, then the government funding was to pay the employees that was going to go down the tubes because they hadn't signed the contract. I said to someone, as a joke, I sort of joke, I said, you could probably get rid of like 90% and you'd be fine. Maybe I shouldn't say that on the air. I don't know. But I think it's important to recognize that, to be able to connect to someone who knows him or knows people that I actually said, this person tried to help me. I want to testify in front of Congress. And I think they need to know. I've been to Israel. I actually spoke in Israel a number of years ago. That was very difficult because I was told you need to speak in Hebrew. I speak Hebrew, but it's different when you're giving a speech.
It's funny. You're getting in trouble for being a spy for Israel, and your Hebrew's not even that good. You're like, what? That's not fair.
Yeah. At that point, I was like, I had to speak in front of a bunch of soldiers and tell them a story. And I'm more comfortable. Like the nuances and everything else, you got to say it in English because the jokes or the funny things,
right?
It's English. And I wrote it up, and I had a friend of mine go through it, and it didn't have the same impact. But I would love to be able to speak to people there. I'd like to be able to go to speak to a lot of the people in their cabinet and tell them what's going on. But anti-Semitism is out. I said years ago, and I won't say to who I said this to, but I said it to a number of different places, different groups. I said, when the Army refused to do anything about the letter from 2 senators, I said, if you don't do anything about this, anti-Semitism is there. It's going to blow up in your faces. And then you're going to have major, major problems. And let's fast forward to today. I'm no Nuffy, but I saw what was going on. And there's a lot of hidden people, hidden agendas, hidden anti-Semitism. It's not that all of a sudden our people are becoming anti-Semitic. It was always like that. But now they're almost given a rubber stamp I can come out and do it because no one's going to do anything about it. And you know what? No one's doing anything about it. And it's a problem.
Well, Dr. David Tenenbaum, I know there's a lot more that we didn't cover. So anyone who wants to pick up the book, where's the best place they can find it? On Amazon?
It's on Amazon.
Or you have a website, and you have a website if someone wants to contact
website.
you.
Yeah, the
DrDavidATenenbaum.com.
Right, Dr. David A. Tenenbaum.
Right, Dr. And we'll put the link in the show notes so people could easily click it.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming and sharing your story. And I'm going to end off with this question. Was there ever a point where you're like, this is just too hard, I got to give up? Like, it's just too much?
Never. That's not the way I grew up. Because my feeling was, in the beginning, number one, I had no choice. And I was actually told this. I had to fight to stay out of prison, I should say. I had to, and I knew just on basis things I saw going on in the intelligence arena, there was a good chance of that. And I saw what they did to other people. And once I to sue, we had to fight because, first of all, to get a job and to clear my name. And I didn't think it would take this long, but it doesn't matter because I was brought up with, you do what's right. And I'll get calls from people now that I can help. So I belong to Whistleblowers. I'm on a board of Whistleblowers of America. And we try to help people there as well. So there was never a time. I have my moments when it's difficult. Don't get me wrong. I just need to be by myself at those times. I'll go work out for a couple hours, or I'll tell my wife or something, I just need some time. And she's a social worker. The fact that she's dealt with me, and I always tell people if she ever want to work on her PhD, I could be her dissertation. But no, the fact that she's dealt with me and she understands, and my kids know, I just need some time sometimes. But I won't lie to you. I need my times. I need to be myself sometimes. Giving up? No, not going to happen. Because if anything, I'm kind of like a poster child. I look at myself that if I can deal with this, if I can get through it, and if it's meant to be, then we can show what happened, then it'll be a domino effect. And hopefully other people can be helped by it too. And it's kind of like a goal of mine to be able to help others that have been in the same situations or traumatic situations.
How would you apply your story to others? Because thank God, not so many people have been accused for spying.
Yeah.
So how would you apply that to others?
Yeah, I don't actually know of anybody that's for spying, but I think the best way of putting it, or the lesson, is that you can reinvent yourself. You can, as my daughter always tells me, you can take lemons and you can make lemon juice or lemonade or whatever you want, but what happens to you and what it goes on, we don't have control over. Everything's a challenge. How you deal with it, that's where the big challenge comes in. And for me, it wasn't such a big challenge. I'm reinventing myself. I worked as a medic. I worked in the field. I chose, like someone said to me, why did you choose to work inner city Detroit? Which is, as my partner once said to me when I first started working in inner city Detroit, when I went up to knock on someone's door, he said, no, that's not how you do it here. You don't go in front of the door and knock. You go to the side of the door. You knock like this. I chose to go there, and I chose to stay a medic, and I chose to become a nurse because that's my way of reinventing myself and still being able to help people. And I chose to still work in one of the highest level trauma places, hospitals in Michigan and Detroit, because I don't want to just go and read a book and just not be busy. I want to be able to help. I want to be able to learn. And eventually, maybe I can even help go when I actually am called back to go to Israel. I can help even more and maybe become a nurse practitioner. Who knows? I'm too old to become a physician at this point. You didn't say, oh, no, you don't look old at all. But
no, you don't look old at all.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
No, you're going on. I don't want to interrupt.
That's no problem. No, but I realize it's not going to happen. But I really feel that don't be stagnant. Don't think you can't do anything about it. Don't let anybody beat you down. You're going to reinvent yourself. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. So that's kind of the way I look at things.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you made it this far, first of all, isn't this a wild story? More on my thoughts on that in a second. But did you know that chances are you are not a subscriber? Whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple, according to our stats, more than half of our listeners are not subscribed. So take a second, please hit that follow button and you'll be served the best and episodes first. If you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, please let us know that you watched this entire interview and say the words Am Yisrael Chai, because we've been using this channel to fight anti-Semitism and frankly show how we're proud to be Jews. And this week, we got back 20 live hostages from Gaza. We've been davening for this. We've been advocating this. We've been begging Shemayim. And thanks to our soldiers and everyone involved, and Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff and President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu. Thank you all. Thank you, Hashem. I'm Yisrael Chai. This episode is powered by Bitbean, Wheels to Lease, The Dream Raffle, and Twillory. Go check them out. When you support them, you support us. Also, very sadly, I found out about the untimely passing of Rav Moshe Hauer Zatzal. He was a tremendous tzaddik, and the Jewish world lost a giant. And on a personal level, he was always so caring to me and the living Chaim as a whole. He was one of the strong forces behind Kosher Money, and we will really miss him. We will continue to spread the light and try to be 1% of his greatness. I will link his episode of Kosher Money below so you can get a glimpse of his godless. Aside from being an amazing leader, he was the real deal as a Yid. He truly cared about each and every one of us. May his family be consoled during these hard times, and may his neshama have aliyah. We are going to really miss him, and this is honestly hitting us very hard. Now, David Tenenbaum, the main reason I wanted to interview him was for this one reason. He was a loyal American engineer, as you just heard, devoted to saving soldiers' lives. And yet, because he was Jewish, he was treated like a traitor. He was humiliated, investigated, and abandoned by the very people who he served. But David never let hatred destroy him. He didn't give up on his faith or on his people. He chose to rebuild, not because life was easy, but because truth and emunah were stronger. His story is a reminder that even when the world misjudges you, you don't have to lose yourself. I can imagine many of you listening probably weren't wronged as much as David, but there's probably been a moment or point in your life where you were wronged for the wrong reason. And David is an example of not to take that personally. It was for some reason a message from Hashem, and we don't necessarily know why or how, but that's part of life, trying to figure it out. Remember, no matter what others can take from you, no one can take your belief, your integrity, or your connection to Hashem. It's never too late to stand tall again. Remember, inspiration's everywhere. L'chaim.
Living L'chaim.